Hi, Chuck Vosberg here, coming to you from the Digital Lab in the Morian Art Center in St. Petersburg, Florida. And today we're going to learn about setting up to shoot artwork. Photographing artwork can be difficult, but it's really not as hard as you think once you know the tricks. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Here's how to set up your camera to photograph your artwork. You'll notice on the front of the camera there's a polarizing filter. The polarizing filter will help to reduce the glare on your artwork and make your results a lot better. Another thing that's important is that you position your camera on a tripod as square and even with your piece of artwork as possible. You'll see here that the camera has been set up where the lens is right in the middle of where the photograph is. That'll make our photo come out a lot nicer. As for lighting, this is probably the most difficult part of photographing artwork. In this case, the art's behind glass, which makes that polarizing filter even more important. And what I've done here is set up two soft boxes, one on either side of the artwork. The reason why I've done it this way is that by having the lights on either side, if there is any glare, chances are it'll appear off to the side where the lens can't see it. I'm using a color target here. The particular one that I like is a Wibal, W-H-I-B-A-L. I kind of like it because it's made out of plastic and it's very durable. You'll be seeing this again in the post-production portion of this video. But it's important to shoot this at the beginning of each shot so that you've got some kind of a reference, so that you know, in this case, you know exactly what's white, what's black, and what's a midtone, so you don't have to take a guess on your artwork. It's a good idea to use a handheld meter if you've got one. In this case, I've got a handheld meter. It's going to give me a perfect exposure. If you don't have a handheld meter, you can easily get a perfect exposure by using the histogram on the back of your camera. Shadows are on the left, highlights are on the right. It's very important not to have blown out highlights, especially when you're shooting artwork. So evaluate your histogram on the back of the camera. Make sure that the graph is not running off the right side of the scale. If it is, reduce your exposure until hopefully the entire histogram is contained within the range of the scale. Hi there, I've got all my images loaded onto my computer, and if you shoot in RAW format, it affords you some extra features that can save you some work when you're doing this kind of work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I've got all my images selected. So I'm going to press Command A since I'm on the Mac, or Control A if you're on Windows. And of course you can go under the menu at the top to do this as well. So all my images are selected. I'm going to double click on the first one to open it up. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to open 31 files, and yes I am. So we're going to go ahead and open these up. Now it's going to take a moment because this is a lot of information. So we're going to have to sit and wait for just a second. Alright, here we go. And it's got all the images open in this series. And the one that I want to select here in this series in my raw dialog box is the very bottom one. It's the reference target that I shot for all these images. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit so we can see the reference target a little bit better. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make sure that this is numerically perfect. So I'm going to take my mid-tone eyedropper right here, also known as the white balance tool, and click on the gray here in the reference target. Now what that's done is that's corrected the color of this piece. Now, my lights are white balanced. The color is going to be really close anyway, but whether you think your lights are perfect or not, you definitely want to do this step. Now, I'm going to take the eyedropper right next to it, the color sampler tool, and I'm going to click to mark some of this white area right here. And then I'm also going to click to mark the black. So that's going to help us as we're adjusting our colors here. So I'm going to click on that number 1, and you can see by looking in the upper right, the RGB numbers are a little bit flat. They're not quite white. So I'm going to go down here to the exposure and begin adjusting this. And you can see by watching the histogram what's going on here. We can verify it, pushing our mouse over here, and you can see the RGB numbers are 248, 250, and 249. They're right up here. I'll put my mouse back on my little mark that I made. So the range goes from 0 to 256. You don't want it totally white. You don't want it 256, 256, 256, because that would wash out your detail on the highlights. You want to have it down about 5 or even 10 points. You can use your judgment on this, but this is about roughly 5 points. Now I'm going to position my pointer on the black, and again, we don't want it 0, 0, 0 for the RGB values, because that would clog up all our details. You want it to be somewhere between 5 and 10. I'm noticing that I've got 9 here, so that's looking real good. I'm going to go with that. Now if I can get the words out, the whole trick to this thing here is that we want to apply these same settings to all the images. So we're going to click Select All. Now this is the active image, so Photoshop knows that this is the one that we want to apply. And then we click Synchronize. And we can choose here whether or not we want to just synchronize certain things, but I'm just going to leave them all set because we're just going to click OK, and it's actually going through and synchronizing this. Now I can click Open Images. It's going to open them all up in Photoshop. Now this is going to take a moment, but once we get them opened up in Photoshop, what we're going to do is we're going to crop each of the images and save them, and then we're going to be in good shape. So we're just going to hang back here for a second and let some of these images open up. Okay, well I've got one open here, so I'm going to get my cropping tool, click and drag a crop, just get it as close as I can, and you can see here that the image wasn't hanging perfectly square on the wall. So I'm going to make sure that up here in the top, perspective is checked. That's the whole key to this, because it lets you move these corners independent of each other. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so that I can really see what's going on, and I'm going to make sure each of these corners is exactly where it's supposed to be. Alright, there's the first one, gets a second one in, shoot on over here, get that lined up, and then finally the top one. Alright, there we go, and I'll press enter to apply this change, and then double click on the hand tool, and you can see here this is cropped perfectly, and if any retouching needs to be done, this will be the time to do it. Looks like I got a little bit of dirt on the glass here that I missed when I cleaned them up, and it's really just that easy. Okay, well I've downloaded all my images to my computer, and we're looking at them here in Adobe Bridge. You might notice that I've already named each of my images by the student's name who made the piece of artwork, and I've also gone in here down in the meta information for creator. I've put in the student's name, the title of their artwork, and down here under location which middle school they came from. In this case they're all middle school students. Now what I did here was I shot the first image with just my reference target. I used a light meter to make sure my exposure was right. If you don't have a light meter, you can always use your histogram to verify your exposure. But I wanted to get this first shot with my reference target in. I'm going to double click on that to open it up. And I want to show you first how to do this, whether you use RAW or JPEG. This will work on both methods. And if you're going to use this method, you don't want to make any changes here in the RAW dialog box. I'll show you how to do it in RAW later. So I'm going to click on Open Image, and this reference target's going to come up in a moment. Here it is. The way we're going to handle this is we're going to make this shot perfect, And then all the other shots, as long as we didn't change any of the settings on the camera or move the lights or change any settings on the lights, the same settings will apply to all the other shots and they'll be perfect too. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over here to the adjustment layer panel and click on curves. And over here in curves there are a series of 3 eyedroppers. We're going to start off with the black eyedropper, then click on the black part of my reference target, click on the mid-tone eyedropper, and click on the mid-tones of my reference target, and then finally click on the highlight and click on the highlights. Now what this has done is it's made all 3 of these numerically perfect. We've got white, black, and neutral gray. So not only is our color correct, but it's also corrected the tonal range of this image. So we've got this perfect. Here's our adjustment layer right over here, and I'm going to name this layer by double clicking on its name and give this some kind of name that'll make sense to me later. And we're finished with this. Now we'll go back here to Bridge and we're going to open up the first shot. And by the way, before I open that, notice that I used my reference target on every single shot here just in case something goes wrong or if there's some kind of question. That way I've got the reference on each shot again. But I didn't change any settings, I didn't move the lights, so I know that this is going to be correct for all the shots. So I'm going to double click on this image to open it up. And again, I'm not going to change any settings here, I'm just going to open it. It'll take just a moment to open up. Okay, here's the image, and the first thing I'm going to do is go up here to the top and grab it by its little tab up here and kind of tear this off to the side because we need to have access to this other picture with the reference target. So I've clicked on that picture, it's the open document, and we've got our adjustment layer down here that we used to correct that. I'm going to grab that adjustment layer and drag it into the window with our piece of artwork. Well, now that adjustment layer gets copied over onto this piece of art, and it's going to be perfect too. The last step on this will be to crop this down, because we don't want any of this wall in here. So I'm going to take my cropping tool and click and drag this as close as I can. And you can see here I didn't quite get this perfectly straight on the wall, so we're going to adjust it. And the way we do it is right up here. There's a little checkbox up here that says perspective. You have to check that box. Then I'm going to go in here and zoom in a little bit on this corner so I can really see what's going on. I'm going to drag this corner in until it's right on the corner of that piece of art. Then we'll go on down to the bottom and drag this in. And because I checked perspective up on the top, it allows me to move each one of these corners independent of each other so that it doesn't have to stay perfectly straight. And finally we'll go up here. It's definitely worth taking the time to make sure these are perfect. And then finally we'll press enter to apply this crop. I'll double click on my hand tool so we can see this. And now we've got our piece of artwork. It's cropped perfectly, the color's perfect, and all I have to do is save it. So I'm going to go under the File menu and then choose Save. And we'll just leave the name the same. We'll put it in the same folder and we'll click Save.